Bonnie, you're muted.
Oh, sorry.
There we go. Thank you. And it was a great intro too. So, woo, it's long. It's a long day. So, but we do want to welcome everyone and thank you for joining us this afternoon. This is our March installment of our Teaching Tuesday, and we're so excited that so many of you could be here with us. We started this initiative back in January, and we've been able to reach several hundred of our PERI folks across not only the state of Ohio, but even across the United States. So again, thank you for joining us. Hopefully everybody has your pencil and paper as we tackle today's topic is the ambulance taking you for a ride. And before we get into that, I do want to, just do a couple of housekeeping things. First of all, we are recording this, and Leslie will be able to put this on the archive of the website. And just to remind everyone, we are in a listen-only mode. So if you do have a question, please acquaint yourself with your little menu bar, and there should be a little Q&A button. If you click on that, you can type your question in there, and we'll be monitoring those and answering those questions as we go today. And then finally, we want to be respectful of everyone's personal situations, and we do encourage folks to have a benefits review, and to make that easy for you to actually schedule. If you would take out your phones, go to the camera function, hover over the little QR code here on the screen. And from there, you can actually put in a request for Jim or I to contact you. So, we can do your benefits review and maybe tackle some of your more personalized issues away from the main group. And we'll also be giving out our personal phone numbers and our emails so we can follow up with any of your questions at a later time. So,
Hey, Bonnie.
Yeah, sure, Jim.
Listen, this isn't something we would normally throw in there, but Scott Judd's one of our senior advisors, and he actually just spoke at a Hardin County public employee retiree meeting. Just hung up with him before this, and he called me just to share. He had 25 people express interest in at least learning something about, hey, how can we help them? And of those 25, he's only spoken to, I think, 11. And of those 11, he has found almost $55,000 sitting in either health reimbursement accounts or unused funds. So there's a lot of our members that really don't understand how that HRA is working. And then if you don't, or you think, hey, it's just too complicated, there's a very good chance you may have money in those funds. And we often help our members, kind of identify those funds. So, if you have any questions, regardless of whether it's relevant to medical transport or this specific webinar, please don't hesitate to reach out to Bonnie or I if we can help you with any general questions as well.
And that's a fantastic point. And Leslie, you probably hear folks talk about this too as you go out to the chapter meetings. We have many of our folks that just don't understand how their benefits work. And really, that's what Jim, myself, the other 24 AMBA representatives here in Ohio, as we sit down with the PERI folks, that's one of the first things we ask is, are you leveraging your state HRA money? Do you understand how that works? Many times we find folks that don't understand how that works or what they can actually use reimbursement for. So consequently, it's just sitting there and it's your money. So, allow us to help you figure out how to access and, really take advantage of your benefit. And Jim, that brings me to this slide. Many times we're asked, what is AMBA? What do we do? So for you folks out there who are not familiar with AMBA, AMBA stands for Association Member, which hopefully is all of you. And then benefits advisors are the people like Jim Kane and myself. And AMBA has actually been around helping our associations for over 40 years. And every state here shaded in blue is the state that we have a relationship in. And as of, just a couple of weeks ago, we went past the 80 different association mark. And here in Ohio, we help not only the public employee retirees, but also the Ohio Retirement for Teachers Association, formerly known as Ohio Retired Teachers Association, the school employee retirees, and the police and fire. And one thing that I've always noticed is as we get into households or sit down with couples, many times we have someone who's a teacher and the spouse is a PERI person or a CIRO person. So I always joke and say, we are multilingual here at AMBA. We understand all of the retirement systems and, can really help our members. And honestly, with all of the over 80 associations, anytime any of those associations comes to AMBA and says, hey, this is a problem facing our retirees, we need a solution. So that's, another thing that AMBA does. We go out and do all the legwork for the association, find the solutions for those problems, bring it back, and then the executive directors, the boards, the legal departments really dive into it and decide, is this a solution to the problem? Is it a good value? And is it, really going to help our retirees so they never say, oh my gosh, why did I spend that much money? Or I wish I would have known that. And through the webinars and through the personal benefits reviews, we make sure that none of our retirees ever say, gosh, I wish I would have known that, and that you're not spending money that you don't have to. So, great point there. And I always forget this part. I could almost, just jump past this slide, Jim. But in case you didn't pick up on it, my name's Bonnie Norris, and I'm one of the district managers for AMBA here in Ohio. I live down in Southwest Ohio, near the city of Oxford. My son's a junior at Miami. I live here on the family farm with my husband. And if you do hear a strange noise, it's probably my 15-pound Shih Tzu supervisor here behind me getting ready for his afternoon nap. But I've been with AMBA and working with the associations. It'll be 8 years next month. So Jim, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Hi, thanks, Bonnie. I've been with AMBA and working with Ohio's retirees for 10 years next month. I actually began my career, there she is.
That's not mine.
Actually began my career as a paramedic. Figured out very quickly that wasn't for me, and I ended up running nursing homes, home health agencies, and rehab centers for about 20 years prior to being recruited over to AMBA and helping Ohio's retirees in that sector. So I often tell members, despite today's topic being MASA, if for any rhyme or reason you, a family member, a close friend is dealing with a major event or trying to navigate Medicare, it can be very difficult. Bonnie and I can certainly answer questions regarding the 101, 202, some 303 level. And even if we don't know the answer, we know how to get it. So please use us as a resource and let us know if we can help in any way, shape, or form.
Mm-hmm. And Jim, when I say that, we're multilingual, the one thing I neglected to say here or just forgot, I actually spent 14 years with Ohio State University Extension. So I have walked in the shoes of many of you that are out there. So, that kind of strengthens my knowledge of what you folks are going through. So as we get started today, we're so fortunate to have Leslie Garcia with us, your executive director. And Leslie, I know you're kind of on the road today and handling some other things. So again, thank you. And I love it. That was your dog, not mine. So, but Leslie, you got a lot going on at PERI right now. Kind of give us an update and, so we can start taking some notes and get some things on our calendars.
Absolutely. And if you do hear dogs, I'm trying to head out from my mother's up in Cleveland. So there's 4 dogs downstairs. And then I have my dog sitting here by me. So if you hear a bark, it's on me, I'm sure. So we do have a lot going on. First and foremost, the annual meeting, save the date, is September 18th. And so we moved that date up a week to not interfere with the Jewish holiday that we normally used to interfere with. So that is going to be September 18th at Crown Plaza. That's been in the newsletter. We continue to do the newsletter, and we'll have open sign up fairly soon when I get that registration done. But I just wanted everyone to know that's on here, that is coming up, and that's a great way to learn even more. And we're hoping to have some legislators, Democrat and a Republican, coming that are specific to the pension plans, whether it be towards the WEP or the ESG or all of the above. So watch for that. We're working on confirmation from them, so I can't give out those names until I find out for sure. I want everyone to make sure that they check out our website, which is www.operi.org. You can find all your local chapters. If you're wanting to know what chapter you're in, it will go under the county that you belong in, and the meeting information is in there. The majority of it should be all up to date and correct. If it doesn't look right, then you always call our office, but we try to keep it up to date when they tell us to. So please get involved. If you haven't gotten to a chapter meeting, at least go to one and see what your local chapter is doing and advocating for. and meet your other retirees. Sometimes it's great camaraderie. Sometimes they have just kind of some good luncheons. And then other times we have great legislators, we have AMBA, and we have many other guest speakers at them. So please get involved. On the web, HR 82, I know a lot of you are impacted by that Social Security issue. Right now, we have 200 co-sponsors on that. They need about 290 to go forward to a floor vote. So we want you to make sure that you check out our website. We have it under legislation, and there's actually a link down there it's called GovTrack, and it will give you all the up-to-dates as it goes. I mean, right now, they haven't really been meeting until they get some co-sponsors and start meeting and working on that bill. They will start probably marking it up with red. So it may not go as a full appeal, but they are committed to making some type of changes on that. So we're watching that very closely for everybody, and we'll get you updates as soon as they decide to get further working on that part of it. We also had the Senate Bill 1302, which was introduced just, I think, Friday, Sherrod Brown, which he did this last year, right along with the HR 82 on the Senate side. So as you know, it has to have House on the federal side and then to the Senate. So sometimes when they come together, they can meet that way. So he's got 42 co-sponsors on his bill already in just a week's time. So we'll be watching that one as well. Lastly, there's also an Ohio Senate bill that's out there that we have been working with and closely. We've testified with it just last week in the House Ohio Senate, and it is called it's Bill 6, and it's ESG, which is environmental social governance. So this pertains to how Ohio pensions will invest your funds. And so Kirk Schuring is the one who brought up this Bill 6. And what his bill stands for is, and we should have a vote on it hopefully in the next week or so, but regarding focused on fiduciary responsibilities only for the Ohio pension plans and not specific to environmental, social, or governance, which is ESG. So that's our standing. We testified along with him and many other organizations, including OPERS, which states that they don't want to have to be directed to invest their money in ESG. They would like to be able to invest it where the most profit is made for the member. So we believe strongly in that. We don't believe that we need to be dictated on it. So we have stood behind that part of it, saying that we definitely want fiduciary responsibility in that pension. So if it means that they end up investing in fossil fuels, well, if that's the most money on the return, that's what they need to do. If it means that they invest in satellites or solar and it's going to make the most money for the pension, then that's what we want them to do. So it's really all about where they put the money in regards to the best profit and return for you as members. So you can watch that closely. As soon as we get updates on that, we will post that as well. But that's what we've been working on.
And Leslie, if I can ask a follow-up question on that, we heard from, of course, this is our fifth program today. We work with the other associations, obviously here in Ohio. We've heard and through the news and newspapers that the state teachers retirement system obviously had investments in one of the failed banks. Is there any statement or situation going on with the OPERS system?
OPERS did have, they had a very small amount, not as much as the teachers, and technically the teachers kind of had a small amount too. I mean, if you look at the overall picture of it, they've lost the most amount of money on the SVB and signature banks. OPERS did have a small amount in there as well. Overall, they're kind of embedded within like mutual funds. And so that's where it's not like it's not like the pension company directly put all their money just to this bank. It's embedded into a mutual fund. And I think police and fire are in the same situation with that. But OPERS had a very small amount that was entered in there. They had their board meeting last week, or no, this week, but I was not able to attend. I was at a different, I was at a chapter meeting. So one of our board members went, so I haven't gotten the update from them yet. but I did talk to one of the board retiree members, Tim Stites, and he's the one who did confirm, but it was a very small amount. And, but I don't know if they put an official statement out yet on it.
Okay, fantastic. So folks, you can see that your PERI association really is your watchdogs. I mean, they're up to date and giving you that information. And Leslie, I know, through the website and your newsletter, you're keeping folks up to date on this, and obviously through the chapter meetings too. So
Yes.
if you have chapter leaders out there, make sure that you are, contacting Leslie or the board, to come out and speak at your chapters. Also, Jim Kane and myself and the folks we work with, we're also here and available to come out and tackle any of the topics this way, because again, we don't want our retirees to say, that would have been nice to know. So just know that, your association is here not only to be your pension watchdog, but also, make sure that they're preserving your health benefits. And so, Jim's comments earlier about the HRA and just understanding how that works, and, and that would be there for you in the future. And then the other thing, with what Leslie spoke about with those local chapter meetings, if you've not attended a chapter meeting, please take time to go to one. They always have, great speakers. Even if they're not AMBA, they're still great speakers. But it's great, to have folks come together, that camaraderie. And a lot of our chapters actually do community based service programs and give back to the community also. But it's always good to get out and see other folks. And then obviously where AMBA really steps in to help the retirees is to bring those, exclusive benefits and discounts. And throughout the year, as we have our webinars, we always try to highlight, the different benefits. And so, this is just the front side of the benefit sheet. So these are all the things that you get because you're a member of PERI. These are many of the group negotiated benefits programs available to you. And folks will say, well, why do I need this? Well, many times you need to fill a gap that was not covered by your benefits that you had, or maybe when you retired, you weren't able to take some of those benefits with you, so they weren't portable. Or perhaps, you're a person who lives outside of the state of Ohio. Maybe you had something that did not transfer outside of Ohio. So, there's potentially a solution here for you. And then many times, you want to take care of your family, your friends, that network of your support. Just know that you can extend these benefits to parents and family members by supporting PERI. And then also one of the biggest things, probably one of the two most often phone calls or inquiries that Jim and I receive is, how do we protect our nest egg, protect ourselves, our loved ones from things like, the catastrophic charges associated with long-term care, home health care, and really just what's going on with the nest egg right now. And today what we wanted to talk about was the gap or the crack to your nest egg that comes when emergency medical transportation is needed. And just to make sure that you are aware that your association does have a solution, and that solution is called MASA. And we'll talk about that a little bit later on. But our main focus today is we want you to be aware of, some potential pitfalls here where there could be a crack to your nest egg, and really just how you can mitigate that either through billing negotiations, or maybe you already have a program in place. We want to make sure that you understand how that program might work, and then also just understand how your medical benefits are going to fill in or start or stop. So Jim, what are some other things we're going to talk about today with our goals?
Well, first, we don't want to scare anybody. I mean, that's not what we do. We simply want to educate and help you understand where Medicare starts and stops. When Bonnie and I do benefit reviews, we are shocked how many of our members, a lot of them understand the gaps in elder care because they've dealt with parents, but a lot of people are shocked when they get a bill for a medical transport, and sometimes they're catastrophic. So we're going to, talk about the issues and the cost, associated with emergent medical transport, whether you're on major medical and or Medicare. Talk about where the level 1 trauma centers are in the state of Ohio, so you have a good idea, simply because Medicare, and you'll hear us say this a couple times, but they will typically cover us 100% to get to our closest hospital. If you're on an Advantage plan or a plan with networks and co-pays, deductibles, you can expect out-of-pocket costs. But that second trip, that's where we have a lot more skin in the game and where you hear those crazy stories. We're going to talk about the myths and the realities of insurance and Medicare, and then how to give yourself that peace of mind that if you deal with an event, you don't have to worry about this gap. And then, like I said, individual benefit reviews for those who are interested. We can do something one-on-one opposed to, any questions you have for the greater group, for the greater good in the chat.
Jim, as we started preparing for this program, it seems like every time we turned on a television or picked up a newspaper or looked at a news feed, someone was talking about these catastrophic medical bills and what was the government doing about it. And really, we wanted to frame today to give you folks, some tips, some tools that you can use if you ever do find yourself in this situation. And I ran across this video, and for those of you here in Southwest Ohio, you're familiar with the ABC affiliate. So we're going to go ahead and play this. And Jim, if you could just make sure that you can hear this.
Welcome back at 6:44. We know that no one likes being hit with an unexpected bill after they have to go to the hospital. But consumer reporter John Mattery shows us why some of the biggest surprises come right after an ambulance ride to get there.
I've reported on surprise medical bills for years. Well, this year Congress is finally taking some action to stop them. But there is one notable exception, and it could hit you with bills for hundreds, even thousands of dollars. Last March, Donna Rosado found herself in a serious health emergency, was rushed to a larger hospital by ambulance.
I went to the emergency room where I suddenly became unable to breathe. I was put on a ventilator for 10 days, and I spent a few weeks in an ICU.
The good news, it wasn't COVID-19. The bad news, Donna got home to a pile of medical bills. You might be surprised to learn that her biggest bill had nothing to do with the hospital visit, but rather was for the ambulance ride, which was not covered by her insurance. A recent study found more than 3 out of 4 ground ambulance rides could result in an out-of-network bill. They're not part of new legislation called the No Surprises Act, aimed at eliminating surprise medical bills.
If we're protecting patients from surprise bills once they get to the emergency room, why not protect them from the surprise bill on the way to the emergency room?
Ambulance companies say they provide costly, labor-intensive services, and insurance reimbursements are too low for them. So what can you do? Ask your insurer to review the claim. Then contact the ambulance company and ask them if they can lower the charge.
Talking to my insurer did the trick for me.
East Coast states have passed limits on what ambulances can charge, but Ohio, Kentucky, and Indiana are not among them. So don't waste your money. I'm John Mattery, WCPO 9 News.
So folks, obviously your first line of defense is if you get a bill, obviously never pay it right away. Make sure that it has gone through the appropriate billing system and everything. But there can be a lot of differences and some things that just will not be covered, even if you do, contact the billing provider. And try to go back and forth with them. And Jim, that's really one of the things I call this the biggest gotcha, when we're talking about, cracks or potential threats to the nest egg. So explain to us why this is such an issue, especially with Medicare.
Yeah, when we do our benefit reviews, a lot of our members really don't understand, where Medicare starts and stops. They have this perception that Medicare is going to cover everything. And unfortunately, they're receiving bills, sometimes large bills. And some of these services were covered for our parents or grandparents, and they are new to our generation. Between 2013, this is actually from the Congressional Budget Office, between 2013 and 2022, the government cut $716 billion from Medicare. And honestly, there were a couple factors, that impacted in 2013. It was first the implementation of the Affordable Care Act. It was also the year that the baby boomers began turning 65 and impacting Medicare, which has only grown, obviously, since then. So there's some things we can't control, like hospital services, Medicare rates, provisions, but there are areas where public employee retirees have went out and said, hey, we can help. And those are areas like the home health, the nursing center, elder care. But that $33 billion on other services, that's medical transport in there. And, right now, like I said, they're going to cover you to that closest hospital, but only basic life support. Anything beyond that first trip we now have skin in the game, and that's really why we go out and share this information. So on that little graph on the left, it may seem shocking, but almost 59% of medical transports are by women. And typically men are the ones that are hurting themselves and doing silly things. But the reason is that women live 3 years longer on average than men. So I will show you in a couple minutes, and it makes obvious sense. The older we get, the more likely we are to use emergent medical transport. So the likelihood that in a given year, 59% of women will be the ones serviced by emergent medical transport. 5 reasons. The big ones are obviously heart attack and stroke, a traumatic event, obviously like a car accident, any neurological disorder, could be a bump on the head, it could be Alzheimer's, dementia, the results of a stroke, respiratory distress. This used to be number 5. It's number 3, I believe now, based on COVID. And it's been a huge increase in medical transports based on respiratory concerns. And then obviously falls. We all live in the Midwest. We all deal with, snow 10 or 15 times a year, and we're never ready for it. And unfortunately, it gets a lot of us. So why are these costs so high, and why are they climbing, and who's using it most? This article about why taking an ambulance is so expensive in the US, it goes into detail about how they could try to justify, these private companies justify billing you for all of the time that the helicopter is not being used. Is called a rotary service charge. They'll bill you for times where the staff is not running, despite it being a for-profit out-of-network company, for the times they're not using the service, so they can justify $1,200, $1,300 for a 6-8 mile trip. But just understand that statistically, those over 65 will take 3 medical transports before death. Average of 3. Some of us will take 13. Some of us may not take but 1 or none. But the average is 3. If you use medical or MASA once, it will typically pay for itself. But understand that you'll take 3 in your life. What category will you fall into? If you look at, the age 60 to 69, 23% of folks in that period will take an emergency medical transport. In your 70s, 29%. In your 80s, 39, almost 40% of people are going to take an emergency medical transport in their 80s, and 53% of folks in their 90s. And I used to look at this slide and think, 90s, why do they even put that on there? 22% of men, 34% of women are now living well into their 90s, not just having their 90th birthday. I just lost a grandmother at 99 following a hip replacement 3 weeks ago, but I still have my maternal grandmother is 102, and they just took her driver's license away. And I mean, it's just the longevity because of modern medicine is ridiculous, but we are using more services as we age for obvious reasons.
That's right, Jim. And you were talking about the ground ambulance, but many times when we're driving down the road or near a hospital, we see those emergency helicopters flying. And, those are really the sticker shocks. When we talk about the real gaps in medical transportation, and we'll look at some actual numbers and some real life examples here in a few moments. But this was an article that appeared in the New York Times a few years ago, and it caught my eye because obviously down here in Butler County, one of the people that they talked to write the article was from Butlerville, Ohio. And for those of you that don't know the booming metropolis of Butlerville, I think there's about 10 houses and a stop sign, and it's located over in Warren County. But this, poor family, had to call in an air ambulance after a car accident. They received a bill out of the blue for over $22,000. And unfortunately, they didn't have that kind of money just laying around. So the air company actually put a lien against their house, and the family had to file medical bankruptcy. So, the article went on to say that this Air Methods, which was the company that, scooped these folks up, their average bill a few years back was over $40,000. And I'm saying 40, so 40, nearly $41,000 was their average bill. And we talked about averages before, and really just the billing, there's a lot that goes into the billing, whether it's, the increase in aviation fuel, just trying to find people, get people trained, sitting around until something, somebody is called in. But there are many things to think about when you think about the bills for medical transport. And obviously the number one thing is the further away you live from a hospital, the more expensive your transportation costs will be, because many times the medical transport provider puts a per mile fee on the bill, which means if you're 10 miles from the hospital, you're going to pay less than someone who lives 15 or 20 miles. That's just simple math, folks. And then you also have to think about, what is the trauma center? Because as Jim said, Medicare may pay for your trip to the hospital, that first trip, but, considering your condition, you may have to be transported on to an actual trauma center. So what does it mean to have the different levels of the trauma center? Obviously, level 1 trauma are your teaching research hospitals with the specialists, obviously the 24-hour emergency departments, more of the places where you see on the news, they took a bad accident victim there or a shooting victim. That's probably how you're going to find out who your level 1 trauma center is. There are other levels though. A level 2 is very similar to the level 1. It may not have the research facility portion of it, and they may not have as many specialists. The level 3s, there's really no specialist. They can stabilize the patient, get them ready for transport on to one of the higher levels. And then with the level 4s, those are more along the lines of clinics where, they can actually attend to minor injuries, get you stabilized and transported on. And, I'm a very visual person. So here's a map of the state of Ohio. And there are only 12 adult trauma centers here in the state. And those are indicated here on the map with the red dots. But you will notice, University of Cincinnati here in Southwest Ohio, Miami Valley and Dayton. We have a couple options in Columbus. We have Toledo, Cleveland, Mahoning County, and then they're in the Akron area. And folks, you will notice there are many, many counties throughout the state of Ohio. There are no dots, or the closest is a blue dot. So I encourage you, look at the map and figure out where your closest trauma center is. And then just know, if your condition is bad enough, you're probably going to end up in a very fast ambulance or one of those helicopters, depending on your condition. And we get the question all the time, why am I not covered by my insurance? I've got insurance. I either have Medicare with a supplement or Medicare with an Advantage plan. Why is my insurance falling short? Well, folks, you have to understand that the commercial policies are only going to pay off of what they consider the usual and customary charges. So that's kind of like the industry standard. And unfortunately, Medicare language, and I'll go into that in just a moment, can be really tricky. And those payments are really based on an approved set of fees. And unfortunately, if the provider charges more than what is allowed, you, the patient, get the bill to take care of. And sometimes, those coverages depends on really the seriousness of your medical condition. And unfortunately, when Medicare gets the bill after your emergency, when you called 911, they have the opportunity to take all the stress and the worry and everything out. They're looking at your bill days, weeks later, and they get to determine, was your condition truly medically necessary that you had to go buy an emergency form of transportation, or was it really just something that someone could have driven you, or you could have called an Uber or a taxi to get there? And when we look at the Medicare and U book, which hopefully all of you folks have, if you turn to page 31 of that book, you'll see where Medicare addresses ambulance services. And the first word that I have highlighted here is Medicare is going to cover that ground ambulance when you need to be transported. So again, they're determining what your need is. And then, they also like to use the word may a lot. They may pay for emergency transportation. They may pay for limited ambulance transportation, but you pay 20% of that Medicare approved amount. So folks, just know that, as Jim said earlier, Medicare does not cover everything. Basically, for them to cover, you have to go to a hospital, not a doctor's office or an urgent care. It has to be the closest hospital. So if you say, oh, take me to Christ, because that's where my heart doctor is. You know, Medicare is just going to send you the bill. And then obviously, you know, they do get to decide if it was truly medically necessary. And Jim, another thing that we see is really just the differences in what is being done by the ambulances when they come and scoop us up.
Yeah, yeah. We bottom line is the easiest way to understand what is Medicare going to cover and then where they draw the line is really that first trip closest hospital. Again, if you're on a Medicare supplement and you know, you plan G, plan N, plan F, and you dial 911, you can pretty much rest assured you're going to have your first trip 100% taken care of. If you're on an Advantage plan, you can expect, based on networks, co-pays, deductibles, and a max out of pocket, you can expect some out of pocket costs. But if they say, hey, Miss Bonnie, we can't help Jim, he's got to go to Columbus or Cleveland, Cincinnati, Toledo, Akron, any of the trauma centers, unfortunately, that's when we have a little more skin in the game. So there's two types of ambulances out there. There's the one that looks like a nice conversion van. That's basic life support. There's another one that looks like a big box truck, like a moving truck with a lot more lights on it. That is advanced life support. One has an EMT, basic. The other one has an EMTP, which is paramedic, that's able to inject and administer medications and intubate and everything else in a traumatic situation. Unfortunately, not covered by Medicare. So as a little red stop sign shares, advanced life support, not covered by Medicare. So what is? Dial 911 if they need CPR, artificial ventilations, little pump bag, oxygen administration with a cannula or a mask, basic airway management. Unfortunately, they cannot intubate. Spinal immobilization, tying you to a board, taking your vital signs and calling them into the hospital, bandaging and splinting a wound, obstetric when necessary, monitoring your blood glucose for diabetics or insulin shock, diabetic coma, albuterol treatments for emergent respiratory situations like, you know, COVID with somebody in respiratory distress. But unfortunately, that next level of EKG monitoring, putting you on and seeing if you're dealing with AFib or a true heart attack, manual defibrillation, advanced airway management like intubation and pump bag, external transcutaneous pacing, fluid therapy, IV administration, needle chest decompression, administration of any type of critical care medications. That's all advanced life support. And unfortunately for our Medicare recipients, it's just not on that list of covered services. And we end up with a bill. And another reason, you know, Public Employee Retirees has or endorses MASA. Now, I laugh every time I see this slide because I'll tell you, Bonnie and I deal with all 4 pension protection associations in the state of Ohio, and it's hard enough to get one board to agree on anything. MASA is one of the few products that the not only public employees, but Ohio Retirement of Teachers Association, Police and Fire Retirement Association, and school employee retirees have all said, yep, this makes a lot of sense. So MASA's logo is any ground, any air, anywhere. And with the exception of a couple areas politically, they will come get you literally any ground, any air, anywhere in the globe, throughout the globe. Cuba is one of the areas where they will not let us land. And the other areas that they've taken off for simple, you know, common sense, they took off Ukraine, and Afghanistan's been off for 2.5 years now. And Russia's still on there, but nobody's really booking that trip. But MASA's really been the leader. In the very early 70s, medical transport was deregulated, and now the FAA is actually governing the medical transport, anything that flies in the air. Has nothing to do with Medicare. It's all private networks, and that's how they're getting away with these ridiculous bills that even under the Surprise Bill Act that we can't get around. There's over 2 million members in this. They grow every day. They've been around since 1974. They have 12 international offices. You know, really their normal coverage area is the US, Alaska, Hawaii, Canada, Mexico, the Caribbean, Bahamas, Kirks, Caicos, and Bermuda. And that you don't have to do anything if you go there. But if you leave that area and you want to go somewhere, you know, crazy like China, Europe, anywhere else, you just let them know where you're going a week or two before you go, and they'll follow you on your trip to make sure you're protected. They're rated A+ by the Better Business Bureau. You know, there's no dollar limits, and it really does protect that that family or that individual from emergent medical transportation related expenses, which you'll see, can exceed $50,000, $60,000.
And Jim, many times, folks will say, oh, well, I don't need MASA because I never plan to go outside the United States. Or, hey, I travel, but I always get travel insurance. Well, folks, with the travel insurance, that's for the week, 10 days, 2 weeks that you're gone. MASA actually helps protect you year round. And I love this little slide because the majority of the bills that MASA is paying is actually for a ground ambulance within a 20-mile radius of your house. So even if you never plan to travel, there's still a need here. Because as Jim talked about earlier, if you're on an Advantage plan, you may have deductibles, co-pays, maximum out of pockets. If you're still on maybe a spouse's insurance plan through their employer, you still have deductibles, co-pays, maximum out of pockets. And the other thing that we see too is these plans differ greatly. There was actually a story on the CBS News that talked about three siblings that were in an accident outside of Chicago, and the same distance to the same hospital. They all received 3 very different bills because of the organizations or the companies providing the transport and the type of insurance that the people had. So folks, one thing that we do need you to write down, you want to make sure that you're checking, if you're on an Advantage plan, what are those co-pays, deductibles, maximum out of pockets? What is it if they're out of network? Because that's one of the things we see, and I think it was mentioned earlier here, many times the transportation companies do not belong to a network. They're always out of network. So again, we don't want you to be blindsided or surprised, by these large bills that you're getting. And the other thing to keep in mind too, we run across folks that have a program in place to take care of this issue. But then when we meet with them, one of the first questions I ask is, if it's a program other than the association endorsed program here, when do those benefits kick in? Because many times they may say, oh, we'll cover anything 100 miles or 150 miles from the house. But, as Jim shared earlier on the one graph, we're heading to the emergency department in our 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s. And, we're not usually more than the 20 miles away from the house, where MASA would cover you if you, fall and have an accident in your bathroom, your backyard, or if you're around the globe, MASA will help pay for those bills. And as Jim talked earlier, with the advanced life support, and you'll see here on the bill, and this is an actual bill that one of our retirees received. They had the advanced life support rate was nearly $1,300. And then they had that mileage that, they charge so many dollars per mile. So this bill and after, Blue Cross paid their portion, that retiree was still left with over $1,300. And the bottom bill here, again, advanced life support, just 9 miles. Well, they got a little bit of a break because they're a little closer to the hospital, but they're looking at a balance of over $1,000. And then as we go to the next slides here, this person was just 4 miles out, but they had $1,300. So, just keep in mind, like I said, each ambulance company can charge a different rate, and, are they in network, out of network? So, what is an ambulance bill? The problem is we never know. And that's why in the video clip at the beginning, that surprise billing isn't covered. And then the last thing here is, that the cost of air ambulance. And you'll see here that, these folks received a bill for nearly $42,000 and their insurance did pay. However, they had a balance due that was the retiree's contribution or commitment of over $8,000. So, if you have a plan in place, terrific. We just want you to know, there are some things that you probably need to look into. You also need to make sure you understand how your health insurance does cover, and just know that your association does have something that can step in and help with these catastrophic bills. And Jim and I hear this from our retirees week in and week out, and we just happen to have a couple testimonial letters from some of our retirees. These folks were actually on vacation in Hawaii. He ended up having a terrible stroke, And MASA stepped in and helped make the arrangements to get him home with an air ambulance bill of nearly $59,000. And MASA actually paid the entire amount. This was one of our Indiana retired teachers. Her husband needed to be life flighted, and they received a bill for over $38,000. Sent the bill, just sent a copy of the bill because there's no claim forms or anything to MASA, and they paid every cent of it. And then this was one of our Ohio retired teachers. Her husband had a little incident with his chainsaw, and a 17-minute flight from Urbana to Miami Valley and Dayton generated a bill of over $21,000. And again, because they all, had the MASA program, they didn't have any worries. They had that peace of mind. They got the bill and then just sent it on. And Jim, you were sharing an incident earlier that one of our retirees actually had a little slip and fall accident.
Yeah, just with one of the last snows, we had a retired educator in Gahanna, went out to get her mail, about 75 years old, slipped on her front porch, landed off the front porch, and neighbors saw her, dialed 911, and went over and got her, and she had broken her wrist. Ambulance took her over to Mount Carmel East, right outside on the east side of Columbus. And 2 weeks later, she got a bill that was declined by Medicare for $1,230, for that transport. And Medicare declined it even a second time after appeal and said, it was a wrist. She was 75. Her neighbor, Uber, anybody would have been capable of driving her for a lot less than $1,230. It was declined, and it simply falls into that may cover the cost based on, standard regulatory standards.
So how does MASA work with, the insurance like that?
Well, they pay it. That's the best way to put it. People used to ask me, Jim, what does MASA cover? Well, it covers everything, any ground, any air, anywhere, that you deal with when Medicare declines something relevant to medical transport. Now, we don't get into it, but there's 2 or 3 restrictions. I mean, if you're, military, you're required to take military transport. They're not going to cover you for, bipolar or schizophrenia or a mental illness dialing 911. But for 99% of all other, emergent medical situations out there, they cover it. And this slide actually talks about, in 2022 through AMBA, public employee, retired teachers, police and fire, what were the 1 through 5 areas where they spent the most money? Number 1, far and away, head and shoulders above everything else, was ground ambulance. So for those folks that think, hey, my local township's going to cover that transport, it's in my taxes, they will, because Medicare will. But when you have to go to a secondary, tertiary trauma center, your local township and taxes, your volunteer fire department are taking you to Columbus or bringing you back home. So air ambulance, that's where it gets crazy expensive. Fortunately, we don't have nearly as many of those as ground, but those are where you're looking at $30,000 to $40,000, and that's within Ohio. Return transport, once they get you somewhere for a trauma, for a med flight, for a specialty procedure, organ transplant, you've got to get home. You're not, getting in the passenger side of the Hyundai and driving back. They're going to transport you, in emergency medical transport with a team, whether that's a med flight back or an ICU trip back. It's covered by MASA. This is what shocked me, is these are the 22 numbers. In 2020 and 21, mortal remains transport was number 5. Car return was number 4. And we think it's because of COVID. We've lost a lot of members, through attrition and obviously COVID. But number 4 on the list was returning mortal remains from our retirees were passed either on holiday or visiting family or on a timeshare, and they're going out of the area and they need to get back home because that's where they want their remains. And then finally, car and RV return. We have a lot of campers out there, but if you deal with an injury, illness, accident, event, anything, they're going to put that car in a flatbed or get an escort to drive your RV back home so you can focus on yourself and not your car. MASA Platinum, which we also now refer to as MASA Basic, because they just launched an enhanced version of this plan. But MASA Platinum, it covers everything you see: air transportation, fixed wing aircraft, helicopter, rotary, ground ambulance to and from, repatriation. If you are ever hospitalized away from your home or Ohio, They don't want you recuperating in a facility outside. They want you home with your spouse in their bed around your doctor and family. They're going to fly you home so you can recuperate locally. Return transportation. If you need to be sent somewhere in a helicopter or in an ambulance and it's, 75, 100 miles away, they're going to get you back by that same service. Escort transportation. If you want to bring a friend, a spouse, a family member, whoever you want, they're taking them too. This is a big one for our members that have grandchildren. If they are ever with you and anything happens, they are also going to be cared for. And a flight attendant, an attendee will fly out wherever you are in the world to find those grandchildren and escort them back to the commercial airport nearest their closest zip code to make sure the grandkids get back to mom and dad while you focus on whatever event is obviously disrupting your travels. Vehicle return, car, truck, RV, van, owner rented, going to get returned to you. Mortal remains return. It's about $12,000 to $15,000 if you were to pass away to be, returned by plane. Organ retrieval, it's about $12,000 to $15,000. Medicare will actually cover your organ transplant. You get a bill for the transport of the organ. MASA will take care of that. But if the transplant team's outcomes are better for that procedure, they'll offer to fly you to the better organ transplant team versus the organ to Ohio. And then, like I said earlier, with a couple exceptions, including Cuba, Ukraine, and Syria, they'll come get you anywhere in the world. If you're leaving outside of their normal coverage, you just send them itinerary 2 weeks before you go so they know where to come find you.
And again, folks, if you do have questions, go ahead and put it in the Q&A there across the bottom. And, Jim, you bring up a great point, as far as like traveling with the grandkids or even just, being at home. And we do want to let folks know that if you do have the 5-year or the lifetime MASA, we'll talk about this in just a moment. But one additional benefit for those folks is this little My ID bracelet. And I love this, and I've helped so many retirees set this up because there's a website you go to and you put your information in, who you are, who your emergency contacts are, your doctors, your medical conditions, your prescriptions, if you have a DNR, basically anything that is medically related that folks will need to know in an emergency situation. And where this plays out is, let's say, with your retiree that fell in the bushes, maybe she was alone, maybe it was a new neighbor that happened to see her fall. If she had her medic ID bracelet, when the first responders got there, they're trained to look for things like this. They would have just gotten out the phone, put it in the camera function for the QR code, scan the QR code, and then they would have known exactly who she was, what her medical conditions, medication was. And Jim, that really helps save time in that golden hour. So instead of the first responders having to go in and find the basket of the prescriptions or, root around to try to find who her ICE person was, the medic ID bracelet really can help, save those very valuable minutes. So, again, why do I need MASA? Let's face it, folks, maybe you don't need MASA, but maybe you do. And really that's what Jim and I can help, through the benefits review. Maybe you already have something in place. Maybe you live in a township that, everything's always covered. But, again, what happens when you go beyond that? But, if you really truly do have a need, which most of us do, just know that MASA does offer the best coverage available. It is that A+ rated that Jim spoke of earlier. It covers you at home for travel, whether it's ground, whether it's air. And, one of the things that we make sure that folks do understand is your membership in your association, your PERI association, truly has its benefits. Not only are they your watchdogs, but they have also gone out and negotiated these programs that really help protect your nest egg. So with the MASA program alone, our PERI members save 40%, and MASA will waive that application fee. So, and you're probably thinking it's like, oh, this all sounds great, but gosh, what's the cost? So for a MASA membership for a single individual, is only $27 a month, and to cover you and your spouse and children up to 26, it is the monthly premium here is just $35 per month. And like I said, there are the 5-year and the lifetime options. Many of our, especially our younger retirees, will get the lifetime option. Go ahead and prepay it. So as long as you're over 50, you can get that and, never have to worry about it again. And let's see. And now, Jim, you spoke earlier, that was the MASA basic, but MASA listened and things have changed in the world and with our family structures, and they have made some enhancements to offer another option. If the MASA basic isn't for you, maybe you have some more needs. Explain to us what our MASA enhanced program is.
Great. Hey, Bonnie, we just had 2 questions come up. I'm going to respond to this if you'll jump in there as well.
Oh,
So
perfect.
basically what's going on is over COVID, we had a whole host of new services under the emergent medical transport umbrella that people said, hey, Jim, is this covered? Hey, Bonnie, is this covered? Hey, MASA, is this covered? And some of those services weren't covered that are a little bit more predominant based on the changing demographics of our world. So MASA said, listen, we're not going to mess with our basic. It's been around for 28 years and everybody loves it. And but for our members that want that full kind of umbrella protection, if you will, we're going to create something called Shield, and it just came out 3 months ago, like little next week, January 1st. But it includes everything that MASA does. Now, again, MASA is $27 a month. This is with your 40% discount. It retails for like $50 for a single and $60 for a couple. You guys get it for $27 for a single and $35 for a couple. MASA Shield is like $12 more, maybe $14 for a couple. But if you're traveling and you ever deal with quarantine, expense, because they say, hey, we're dealing with this event, we got to quarantine you. I was just, on a vacation where a room was $300 a night. I could afford 4 nights of vacation. Unfortunately, if I got quarantined there for 10 nights, I could not afford $3,000. This is what this company will, the Shield does if you deal with quarantine expense. Grandchildren that are traveling with you or great-grandchildren traveling with you, with MASA, if you have an event personally, they're going to fly somebody out, get those grandkids, take care of them, get them back to mom and dad. Well, with Shield, they will actually cover those grandchildren financially, anybody up to the age of, I think, 15. And if they deal with anything, even in their own home, Bonnie just had somebody that's already used this since January. Grandparents here living here in Ohio. Grandson was in Seattle, Washington, was in a soccer game, was injured, dialed 911, called grandma and grandpa, told them about it, put them on Zoom on camera phone or iPhone. And grandpa said, hey, I just got this thing and it's going to cover that. And the family got their big bill and gave it to grandpa. MASA paid it and actually covered the family's deductible that helped them with the kids' coverage. So MASA will also cover your deductible, but the Shield actually covers grandkids as well. This is the other big one that our members really asked about all the time. Jim, I got to go to rehab. I'm using a wheelchair walker. I had a hip replacement, knee replacement, stroke. Does MASA cover that? Well, that's not an emergency. That's MASA basic. MASA Shield is now going to provide that medical transport from hospitals to rehab to nursing homes, home healthcare transportation coverage. Now, it's not going to take you to your dentist or for your checkup, but anytime you're doing rehab or something where you need medical transport based on a transport unit opposed to an Uber, they're going to cover it. Extended hospital stay, private room. If you're ever in a hospital and you have Shield, they're going to pay for that, somebody else to kick them out of that room so you get your own room. Companion return transportation. The MASA Basic is going to send somebody, if you're in a hospital for 7 days, you deal with the major event, MASA Basic is going to cover somebody to fly wherever you are. After 7 days, they can stay a day, a week, a month, however they want to help you. With Shield, they're actually going to cover their expenses, their hotel expenses while you're in the hospital, their food expenses while they're there. I'm sure there's a limit. I think it's like $1,500, but they're still going to cover those expenses so you can have a family member, if they can't fly your bottom back to Ohio. And then the big one is these medical payment advisors. I had to research what this was, and it's brilliant. When you deal with a major event, you're going to have a stack of papers this thick of bills, what's been covered, not covered, declined by Medicare, patient responsibility, schedule of benefits, what you're eligible for. This medical payments advisor will say, hey, send me all that stuff. and they'll help you go through everything to understand what is your exposure. You've got MASA, this is all going to be covered, but here's other areas where you may be at risk. So it's just an enhanced version. They should have called it MASA Enhanced, but that's exactly what it is. There's MASA and then there's Shield. So if it's worth $12, $14 a month, or there is a lifetime available, you got to live 9 years for the lifetime to be a better deal. But if you've got some longevity in your family and you think you'll be around 10 or longer, the lifetime's a much better deal.
So again, 2 options to cover this program. A lot of information today. Hopefully you folks have taken some notes. You're going to go to your outlines of coverage, figure out if you are on a Medicare Advantage plan, what is your maximum out of pocket in network versus out of network, because again, a lot of times the ambulances don't belong to anybody's network. So, we want to make sure we arm you with the best information. You've got that. And maybe, like I said earlier, you do already have a program. So just look into that, look into the fine details of that program. Because a lot of times, especially in Southern Ohio, we'll run into, somebody has a program that only covers helicopter transport. So if you do have a plan in place, does it cover all of the different things that we talked about here today? Is there a mileage limit? Will they scoop you up in your bathroom or your backyard? Or, does their services kick in when you're 100 or 150 miles from home? So,
Hey, Bonnie.
Yeah, go ahead.
A question came in and it said, hey, I don't see anything about my 5-year plan and or the lifetime. We just kind of shared, Bonnie was just talking about the lifetime before that question came up or after it came up. But there is a 5-year. 5 years a little, we don't help a lot of people with 5-year because a lot of people in their early 70s think I want a 5-year. And then at 76, they call us again and they want another 5-year. And at 81, they call us again and they want another 5-year. And then they're kicking themselves because they didn't buy the lifetime. So we typically just recommend monthly if you're, but if that's all your budget allow, or if you're over 75, 76, 77. But if you're, if you're under that and you've got longevity in your family, which again, 22% of men and 34% of women are living into their 90s, it takes 9 years. So if you're comfortable with 9 years, that lifetime's a much better deal. But if you are 76, 77, then that 5-year is a great option. And then we just move you to monthly when you hit that 81st birthday or 5-year. Great question though. Thank you very much.
Yes, thank you. And, just know that there are, different ways to handle all of this. And that's why, Jim and I are here to really make sure that you understand how your benefits work and truly what, PERI has in place, to help make sure that you're not spending money that you don't have to, and that you're not blindsided. And, one of the things that we want to make sure that everyone knows is obviously next month, we will be doing our Teaching Tuesday again, and it will be the Protecting Your Nest Egg. So we do encourage everyone to go to the PERI website. You can actually sign up for that through the PERI website. And then we'll also be putting on the recording from today. So if you have questions about that, you can obviously review it and then, contact either Jim or myself. And let me just share our screen again here with our contact information. And again, if you can all get your phones out and put it in the camera mode. And I've got the QR code here, so you can actually scan over it, type in your information, and then Jim or myself will be contacting you so we can answer your questions. And then, as Jim stated at the top of our program, many times, especially with our PERI folks, it's hard to understand how your HRAs work and everything. And day in and out, week in and out, we run across PERI folks that are really just letting that money sit there, aren't really leveraging their benefit. So, please make sure that you schedule your benefits review. We're here to help and make this, more, we help you understand your benefits better. So there's my contact information, email and phone number, as well as Jim's, and there's the QR code. We thank you all for your service, and we hope to see you next month as we do our Protecting Your Nest Egg on April 18th. Jim, have we forgotten anything today?
No, I'm just going to throw it out there that David Prindle shared that, if anybody wants to take a listen to these recordings, they can go to the Public Employee Retiree website. There's some folks from out of state that don't always have access to the information, and it's another great resource. And someone else shared that Oprah's is having a seminar the same day the next month in your area at 3 p.m. Is that Oprah's or is that PERI? Oh, that's actually going to be Oprah's in the area. Yeah, we public employee retirees have their local chapter meetings. And there's one more question. You've discussed MASA referring to Medicare Advantage plans. If you have a Medigap plan, yeah, let me explain that. One last question that came in. We talked a little bit about the risk if you have a Medicare Advantage plan, because those plans typically have networks and co-pays and deductibles, and you pay a little bit, for every little service. If you have a Medigap plan, also known as a Medicare supplement, like a plan F or G or N, and there's some J's out there and some L's and some K's. But if you have any lettered plan, those plans are what will typically cover you 100% to your closest hospital. But the minute they finish that first direct service, that's when we all have, that's pretty universal. Advantage plan, Medicare supplement, secondary, tertiary, anything advanced life support out of the area or back to your area is on us. So Medigaps are great, but only for that first trip.
And, it still gets down to if Medicare approves the charge.
Of
So,
course, yeah.
it always goes back to that. And then we did have one other question here. I believe the gentleman is asking, he lives in California. Yes, actually, you can get MASA for California also. So, I encourage you to reach out to Jim or myself and we'll help you with that. And I think we had one more question come in. Okay. Oh, no, Carol just said thank you. So hopefully, folks, we've given you a lot of great information today. And again, we are here to help you and really navigate this whole, craziness that is our benefits systems and with Medicare and everything else. Jim and I go through training every week, that continuing education piece, while you folks are enjoying your retirement. So, it's our privilege to be able to share the information with each of you. So thank you, be safe, and hopefully we'll see everyone next month.
Appreciate your service. Bye-bye now.